The first scripture reading is from the book of Lamentations, everyone's favorite happy book in the Old Testament, right? Now, scholars have kind of debated whether it was written by Jeremiah or not. They've kind of gone back and forth. I always have a running joke that some scholar wants to look for something that's different and just critique it just to get some book or something published or work on their doctorate. So with Lamentations, some have attributed it to Jeremiah. It follows immediately after his book, and some in the New Testament says he wrote it. But it's kind of similar to Job in that it's just dealing with a lot of grief and suffering. Same things we kind of deal with and wonder in the world. Why are we sad? Why is there pain? Why is there suffering? So that's where we are with Lamentations. So chapter 1, verses 1 through 6. How lonely sits the city that once was full of people. How like a widow she has become, she that was great among the nations. But she that was a princess among the provinces has become a vassal. She weeps bitterly in the night with tears on her cheeks among all her lovers. But she has no one to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They have become her enemies. Judah has gone into exile with suffering and hard servitude. She lives now among the nations and finds no resting place. Her pursuers have all overtaken her in the midst of her distress. The roads to Zion mourn, for no one comes to the festivals. All her gates are desolate, all her priests groan. Her young girls grieve, and her lot is bitter. Her foes have become the masters, her enemies prosper, because the Lord has made her suffer for the multitude of her transgressions. Her children have gone away, captives before the foe. From daughter Zion has departed all her majesty. Her princes have become like stags that find no pasture. They fled without strength before the pursuer. This ends the reading of the Old Testament. And now on to Luke, who's not quite as depressing as Lamentations. Chapter 17, verses 5 through 10. The apostle said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your slave who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here at once and take your place at the table'? Would you not rather say to him, 'Prepare supper for me, put on your apron and serve me while I eat and drink? Later you may eat and drink'? Do you thank that slave for doing what was commanded? And so you also, when you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, 'We are worthless slaves. We have done only what we ought to have done.'" This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So being human, we have some weird tendencies and some seemingly hardwired quirks. At least I do. I guess I can't speak for everyone else. But one of those alluded to oddities is if we have experienced, tasted, or acquired something that we really enjoy, then chances are that we want more of it. For instance, that very first time that I tasted a cheeseburger, I fell in love with all that went on with it and in the way it acted on my taste buds and satisfied my hunger. I appreciated the balance of the buns, the meat, and the condiments all mixed together. So it's highly likely that any time I get an opportunity to have a cheeseburger, I take that chance. So the same kind of thinking could be said for technology. We want televisions with better and sharper pictures, an internet that we can surf and download things with faster, and phones that can provide more options and access for us. The same goes for entertainment and food and many more of life's enjoyable products and adventures. Of course, in our current culture and society, wealth seems to be a primary goal, or a substance that we desire to acquire and have a good amount of. On a rational level, this all makes sense. By attaining more money, we are essentially able to attain more food, bigger and better televisions that get the latest technological advancement or innovation, and enjoy more entertainment. We see the desire and the drive influencing the thoughts the actions and the words of others, and maybe even a little in ourselves. However, this pursuit of wealth in itself was a grave concern for God. In fact, one main issue to come from that concern is when does one seem to get to the point that they feel they've attained enough wealth? Is there a goal that is set, or one that may never be reached or attained that continues to remain just beyond one's grasp? It seems to be a dangerous cycle that Christ wanted to warn us about many times. So I believe Jesus understood kind of our natural human tendency and thirst for more, and to have a large drive for more things and bigger and better things that we enjoy in life. So when the apostles asked to have their faith increased, to us it seems like a very valid and reasonable request. I mean, who among us does not want more faith, right? See, this is even further hammered home when you look at the few verses that come before this set that we read today. Verses 1 through 4 of Luke 17 provide the 12 disciples a reasonable insight into what is expected of them, all from Christ himself. So with my previous sermon series being what it was, certainly I'm all for expectations. But within these 4 verses, Christ covers various subjects and emphasizes to the disciples that occasions for stumbling are bound to come. He tells them to be on their guard and that we must forgive even if someone wrongs us 7 times a day. So being followers and those seemingly closest to Christ, it's understandable that much would be expected of them. I would imagine, too, that for Christ, his immediate followers would want more or less to be a reflection of Christ and of Christ's character. Therefore, it was critical that they behaved and acted in a way that was somewhat Christ-like. For they, in parts and despite their inherent flaws, represented Christ wherever they went and with whatever they said or did. So granted, though, we all know that and understand that even though Jesus handpicked these 12 disciples, they still made mistakes from time to time, much like we do. So nevertheless, they were seeking to grow and increase and strengthen their own faith, as we humans naturally want to do. So as a result, they had the simple request to increase their faith. So with this justifiable question from the disciples in hand, just think of the infinite possibilities having more faith could provide us. More faith would seemingly make us immune to doubt, the doubt of God's presence in our lives, the doubt of wondering if God hears our prayers, the doubt if we truly will get to live joyfully through our own resurrection. And more faith could provide us the capabilities to truly and more easily share our own faith with strong confidence and conviction to other people. And maybe, more importantly, more faith would give us the ability to fully trust in God. Even if it means realizing that maybe God has a different plan for us. And just maybe God actually does know more than we do. A more faith would calm our nerves over the rising violence and issue of suffering that we have in the world. But without even just a smidgen of faith, would we not partake in any of these following activities? Would we attend church if we had little to no faith? Would we commit to praying and participating in prayer if we had little or no faith? Or would we even live our lives in a Christian manner if we had no faith? I doubt it. You see, again, like wealth, when would we be fully satisfied? How much faith would we truly need to feel that we have to say that we arrived or attained enough? And that alone is an issue of itself. And so with this too, we should also be very cognizant of Christ's response to his disciples. Hopefully most of us understand by now that Christ certainly was not a yes man. Very rarely, if ever, when he was asked a pointed question or a guide for discernment or validation from others, Jesus would ever respond, "Why, yes, that's exactly right. Do just that." Now, personally, being removed contextually and visually from this conversation that he had. It does add an extra challenge to it for us in understanding it and seeing it. However, based upon our understanding of Christ's character and his ministry, I feel we could safely make a few educated guesses and assumptions regarding his own reaction. You see, the message from Christ in regards to faith is one where I feel he is saying that even with just a smidgen of faith, we are capable of a great many things. You see, Christ himself proclaimed that if you had the faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and planted in the sea, and it would obey you. And now, as opposed to our typical line of thinking where we picture Christ scolding the disciples and possibly looking upon them with disdain and disappointment, now let us instead picture a Jesus with a smirk, a big grin, and a large amount of enthusiasm, kind of like a Hollywood-depicted used car salesman that you might find. Imagine Christ uttering these words with the utmost excitement, enthusiasm, encouragement, and love intended for his disciples. And maybe he responded by saying, "Hey guys, seriously, you think you need more faith? Oh, no. That's not the case. You see, your faith is in God, which would, be me, my Father, and our confusing Holy Spirit. Therefore, the faith which you already have, no matter how large or small you may perceive it to be, resides in a God that's more powerful, more loving, and more forgiving than one could ever fathom, no matter how deep or wide or large one's faith might be." Does that seem to be a little clearer? It also should be said that the story and the correlation between the master and the slave is an important one. Again, with the mindset of Christ that we are trying to see in a new light, just imagine how he might convey this message. Kimberly Long, a professor at Columbia Theological Seminary, painted this picture in regards to the relationship between the master and the slave, and Christ's own explanation. Miss Long states, what Jesus describes as a relationship between master and servant that is marked by mutual accountability and expectation. You see, the master expects the servants to perform their duties, and the servants in turn expect that when their work is done, they will receive nourishment and rest and protection. So to understand faith in this way, then, is to understand it as a way of life. Those who serve God do so with a sense of duty and delight, living life according to God's commandments, and that would be us. We serve God and one another, and not for the bonus points, and not only because God expects it, but because we know that God has shown us the way to abundant life. So in other words, the question whether one has enough faith is to just miss the mark. The issue at stake is how we live together. How do we keep from leading one another into the valley of the shadow of death? How do we manage to keep forgiving one another over and over and over again? But we do it not because we have a superhuman reservoir of faith stored up, but because God has given us what we need to flourish abundantly in faithful community. So in this kind of economy of faith, we who serve depend on a benevolent master who not only expects us to obey, but gives us all that is required to do so. So in addition to all of these previously mentioned factors, there is another benefit to not gauging the size of our faith. You see, one of those reasons has to deal with a very real notion that we live in an extremely competitive culture, meaning we're always comparing ourselves to others and trying to decide which athlete is better than the other, or comparing some sort of data, statistics, or figures to make a determination on what, who, or how something is better than another. But is faith something that we should quantify? In a world where we want to turn everything into something quantifiable, as something measurable or something that puts us in the lead or gauges us as being behind. Would having bigger, better, and stronger faith do just that? Does the size of our faith really even matter? Maybe that's another point that Christ is trying to make. Perhaps Christ is stressing that the understanding that no matter how big or small our faith is, we are, in fact, still faithful. But like a slave to their master, we still have responsibility. And God will still provide for us. And so at the end of the day, we should understand that it all starts with just a little bit of faith. A faith the size of a mustard seed, that planted within us has great potential. Yes, our faith can, in fact, grow too. In addition to its growth, we can nourish it, support it, and be aware of it. All of which can be accomplished in a variety of ways. Through small groups, Bible readings, prayers, church attendance, and participation in various ministries. So we must understand that what's at stake is not the size of our faith. The size of our faith will not make us a better Christian or give us more knowledge or more power. What is truly at stake is that we have a powerful God that we have faith in. But we know that with and through God, all things are, in fact, possible. Also at stake is the accountability and forgiveness that we must exhibit within our own faith community. You see, those are all at the core of what Christ was conveying to the disciples. And I feel what's essential for us to understand. But with our faith, we realize that we are not self-reliant, or at least as much as maybe we thought we were. We understand that our faith cannot necessarily be measured, and nor should it be compared. Rather, we are meant to live in a loving, accountable, forgiving community that is reliant and dependent on God, and a God that is much more intelligent, powerful, and stronger than we could ever hope to be. And that, my brothers and sisters, is a wonderful thing. Amen.